There are 1,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, yet none so strange as to live in a world reborn under ice. Terra, the cradle of mankind, once burned with the light of the Golden Throne. But in this alternate age, that light never came to be. The Emperor fell before his grand ascension, struck down not by blade or treachery, but by exhaustion. The Great Crusade collapsed, and for centuries humanity trembled on the edge of annihilation, until she came. They called her Elsa of the Frozen Worlds, a psyker born upon a forgotten colony near the Halo stars, where the warp storms whispered like blizzards and reality itself froze between breaths. She was no saint, no clone, no shard of the master of mankind. She was simply different. Where others drew madness from the warp, she drew order. Where the warp burned, she made it still. When she came to Terra, the planet was a ruin of ash and faith. Millions starved in the shadows of colossal statues, praying to a corpse that never lived to become divine. The High Lords bickered over scraps of authority, their fleets shattered, their psykers mad. The Astronomicon was dark, and from that darkness came a frost storm, white lightning cascading from orbit, blanketing the cradle of humanity in snow for the first time in 10,000 years. From the storm's heart walked the woman who would rule the Imperium. Her eyes glowed pale blue with warp light. Each step she took froze the marble beneath her boots, and the air itself shimmered with psychic tension. Her voice echoed across the palace of unclaimed thrones. "You have worshipped death for 10,000 years. I bring you life, though it may come cold." The Adeptus Custodes, relics of the Emperor's will, moved to strike her down, but their golden armor cracked beneath unseen frost, their blades grew brittle, and their gene-forged strength faltered under the crushing weight of serenity she imposed. They did not die, they knelt. Within hours, the Council of Terra lay silent beneath a layer of rime. Frozen statues, perfectly preserved in the moment of their last breath. Elsa's coronation was not declared, it simply was. Her throne was carved from the heart of the Emperor's empty sarcophagus, her scepter a length of living ice wrapped in psychic flame. The first decree of the frozen empress was paradoxical. No more worship. She commanded the ecclesiarchy to be dismantled, but instead of purging them, she transformed them. Priests of the old faith became the seraphs of stillness, their robes pale, their hymns sung in tones that calmed the mind and silenced the warp screaming. The power of belief was not destroyed, it was cooled, shaped, and refined. The Mechanicus bent next. At first they called her blasphemer. No flesh may challenge the Omnissiah, they said. But when Elsa extended her hand and touched the Martian forges, the machines themselves purred to life. She whispered into the machine spirits, not with fire, but with understanding. For the first time in millennia, the red planet thrummed with harmony instead of static. The Fabricator General called it a miracle. Others called it heresy. And far above, in the blackness of orbit, the astropaths began to dream again. Not of screaming daemons or endless war, but of a vast, crystalline light spreading from Terra, a frozen sun that burned with calm instead of rage. The warp did not vanish, it merely hushed. For the first time since the fall of the Emperor, ships traveled without madness clawing at their minds. Humanity began to hope again. Elsa's rise was not heralded by conquest, but by stillness. She did not march armies. She paused the galaxy and rebuilt it in ice and logic. Yet even in her serenity, there was danger. Her power drew the attention of things that thrived on heat, on chaos, on rage. From the depths of the Eye of Terror, ancient eyes opened. Khorne's laughter froze in his throat. Tzeentch's plans stuttered, entangled in frost. Slaanesh dreamed of silence. Only Nurgle smiled, for even in the cold, decay finds purchase. As the Empress looked out from the spire of the Palace of Unclaimed Thrones, she felt the warp stir beneath her feet, resentful, whispering. Her ice could suppress the storm, but never erase it. Behind her calm expression, something vast and fragile shimmered. Compassion twisted into control. Her closest attendants, psychers, scholars, soldiers, felt the air grow colder each day. Some called it peace, others called it suffocation. The galaxy did not yet know it, but the age of ice and silence had begun. And in that silence, seeds of rebellion were already thawing.
Terra did not sleep anymore. The world itself had become a cathedral of frost. Oceans were locked beneath miles of ice. The Himalayan mountains shone like crystal spires. And the once golden imperial palace now glimmered blue beneath auroras that danced across a perpetual twilight sky. From orbit, Terra appeared beautiful, hauntingly so, a planet reborn in shimmering silence. But beneath the surface, the whispers of resistance stirred. The Adeptus Terra, bureaucrats of the old age, still met in secret vaults, clutching relics of the Emperor's era. They whispered prayers to a god long dead, believing that the Frost Queen was a daemon in human form. Yet, curiously, their prayers no longer reached the warp. Elsa's psychic calm stretched across the soul system, muting even the smallest echoes of faith. Still, the Empress was not blind to rebellion. She allowed dissent to survive, if only to test it. For Elsa ruled not through fear, but through inevitability. The frozen winds themselves seemed to enforce her will. Those who raised arms found their weapons locking in permafrost. Those who blasphemed found their tongues too cold to form words. It was said that the air around her carried judgment. And yet, for all her bod-like serenity, Elsa felt loneliness gnaw at the edge of her composure. She had stilled the warp, but also its song. The galaxy was peaceful, yes, but quiet, in the way a tomb is quiet. To fill that void, she turned her eyes to the stars. The Astra Telepathica reported a phenomenon unlike any in recorded history. Across thousands of light years, psychers were awakening. Children on hive worlds began to freeze their own tears mid-air. Astropaths reported dreams of a woman cloaked in frostlight, her hand outstretched toward them, calling not for worship, but connection. Elsa's power was contagious. The human race, long cursed with fragmented psychic potential, began to harmonize. It was the first step toward her greatest project, the Great Reformation. In the Chamber of Echoes, deep within the palace, Elsa met with her most trusted allies. There was High Custodian Kaialos Vair, whose golden armor was now inlaid with frost crystals that hummed faintly with psychic energy. Magos Cryan of Mars, whose red robes glimmered with circuitry alive with auric blue light, and Arch-Seraph Amelia, leader of the new faithless church, serene and blind from the cold that had taken her eyes. The council spoke in tones of reverence and fear. "My Empress," Amelia whispered, "the people no longer pray. They listen. Is that your will?" Elsa turned her gaze upon her, soft but piercing. "Faith was once a fire. It burned too hot, and it blinded us. Let it now be snow, reflective, pure, and still." Magos Cryan tilted his head, servo arms wearing, and the Astrates half have turned their backs upon Terra. They claim your serenity weakens the Imperium's blade. Elsa's eyes flickered with distant light. Then they will learn that stillness is not weakness. Even ice under pressure becomes unbreakable. Her words were calm, yet the chamber's temperature dropped. Frost spread across the steel floor in elegant fractals. Kailos Vair did not flinch. He merely bowed. "Then it is time, Majesty. Time to call them home." And so Elsa's message spread through the stars, not through vox, not through warp, but through thought itself. A psychic whisper carried on the calm currents of her frozen domain. "Children of the Emperor who never was, your mother calls. Come to Terra, lay down nor wrath, take up serenity." Some heard and obeyed, others spat in defiance. Among those who refused were the Black Templars, whose zealous fury could not abide peace. They declared her a false god and turned their crusade ships toward Sol, banners of fire against the backdrop of ice. The Ultramarines, ever pragmatic, sent envoys to understand her power. The Blood Angels remained silent, torn between discipline and doubt. The Space Wolves, Far and Fenris, howled at the psychic chill seeping into their skies. But the first to arrive were the Grey Knights. The fortress world of Titan trembled as the Empress's psychic frost reached its vaults. For the first time in their order's history, daemons no longer clawed at their dreams. Silence filled their sacred halls. An honest silence, free from warp corruption. Grand Master Valorian knelt before Elsa in the Hall of Frostlight, his silver armor steaming in the cold. "We were forged to fight daemons. If your will makes them flee, then we are your blade." Elsa smiled faintly. "Then let the galaxy know. Mankind's protectors no longer fight to burn away chaos. We freeze it in place." It was the dawn of the Frozen Crusade, though the galaxy did not yet know the name. As the Grey Knight returned to the stars in her service, the Empress looked once more toward the void. She felt the eyes of something vast watching her, patient, amused, curious. The warp was quiet, yes, but beneath that quiet she sensed movement, like cracks forming beneath a perfect sheet of ice. Still, Elsa breathed in, her breath crystallizing before her. She smiled to herself, a serene, sorrowful expression. "Let them watch," she murmured. "Even gods can freeze." Far across the stars, a daemon's laughter faltered mid-echo. Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul. More frost and fury await.
Elsa's vision for the Imperium extended far beyond Terra. The galaxy, fractured and weary, was a canvas for her frost. She did not march merely with armies, she moved with precision, using the psychic resonance of her presence to orchestrate planets, fleets, and psychers into a unified whole. It was a reformation of scale and scope the galaxy had never known, and in her mind, every soul was a note in a grand symphony of ice. Her first decree of the Great Reformation was subtle yet profound. Every imperial world must submit its psychic potential to the service of the Queen. Hive worlds became crystal monasteries, their populations trained to harmonize their emotions with the cold serenity of the warp. It was not slavery exactly, but a discipline unlike anything the Adeptus Ministorum had ever known. Citizens who resisted found themselves naturally disoriented, their psyches chilled into submission. Even the most rebellious noble families discovered that their schemes froze mid-motion, undone by the subtle psychic frost that pervaded every imperial world. At the same time, the Mechanicus crafted new instruments under Elsa's guidance. Cryogenic engines and frost-based void weapons appeared alongside traditional las and plasma-based arms. The Frost Titans, enormous walkers of glacial metal, lumbered across ice-swept worlds. Each bore a psionic core attuned directly to the Empress, capable of freezing warp storms or immobilizing entire Xenos battalions. When a Tyranid hive fleet approached the frozen frontiers of the Imperium, the Titans did not merely fight, they stilled the alien advance. Psychic tendrils of cold twisted through Tyranid synapse clusters, slowing the creature's reflexes and driving lesser organisms into panic. Yet, even in triumph, there were cracks in her vision. The Space Marines, as always, were divided. Chapters such as the Ultramarines and Grey Knights accepted her authority with pragmatic discipline, while the Black Templars and Space Wolves openly rebelled. The latter declared that a ruler who wielded serenity over steel had no right to command the fate of humanity. And while Elsa could impose order upon fleets and planets, she could not crush the feral loyalty of chapters raised for combat and blood. Her attention turned to the Psykers, the most promising and most dangerous instrument of the Great Reformation. Elsa organized them into a choir, not of song, but of mind and spirit. On the moon of Prospero, thousands of sanctioned psykers gathered to form a psychic lattice that resonated across the galaxy. From this network, she created the Frozen Astronomicon, a beacon not of light, but of cold clarity. Ship navigators reported that star lanes became easier to traverse. Warp storms calmed, and the screams of the warp receded like a tide held at bay. But, with each victory, the warp reacted. Elsa could not erase it, she could only redirect it, freeze its currents into unnatural stillness. Somewhere in the Eye of Terror, demon lords whispered warnings to one another. A mortal binds the storm. She is neither chaos nor order. She is cold. Korn's fury stilled. Tzinch's plots faltered. Slaanish's dreams recoiled. Only Nurgle moved freely, his diseases laughing beneath the ice, immune to her subtle psychic chill. Within the Palace of Terra, Elsa oversaw her ministers and generals, watching them act with precise competence. Kylos Vir directed planetary defenses. Magos Cryon orchestrated frost-forged manufactorums. Arc Seraphim Emilia guided the choir of psykers. Each moved with skill honed over decades, yet every action was subtly guided by Elsa's psychic presence. She did not micromanage, she synchronized.
Every mind, every decision flowed like a frozen river toward the same end. And yet, even as harmony spread across the Imperium, not all was peaceful. Subtle rebellions flared on worlds where tradition was strongest. On Macraj, ultramarine veterans grumbled at the rigid serenity imposed upon them. On Fenris, space wolves resented the unnatural cold, claiming it stifled the bloodlust that forged their legends. And on Terra itself, remnants of the old Adeptus Custodes whispered that the Queen of Frost was too powerful, too alien, that one day she might freeze not just the galaxy, but the very soul of humanity. Elsa, however, did not flinch. She had learned long ago that power was only dangerous when it was poorly guided. She walked among the frost-cast halls of the palace, observing the silent snow drifting from ceiling to floor, thinking of the galaxy as a vast, intricate clockwork, each world a cog, every citizen a gear. For the first time in millennia, humanity was aligned, coordinated, yet somehow restrained by elegance. And yet, deep within the warp, a new disturbance emerged, subtle, almost imperceptible. Elsa's frozen lattice amplified her power across thousands of light years, but this very amplification created a blind spot. Something moved in that space, neither fully demon nor fully mortal. Whispers reached her mind in dreams, half frozen, half voiced. Elsa awoke from each with a chill deeper than the cold she wielded, a reminder that no matter how vast her power, the galaxy remained alive with unpredictability. Still, she pressed on. She sent fleets outward, not to conquer, but to organize. Worlds that had suffered under endless war, Xenos incursions or rebellion, were stabilized with minimal bloodshed. Planets of feuding nobles were drawn into networks of psychic resonance, where disputes resolved themselves in icy logic rather than violent skirmish. And where war was unavoidable, Elsa's frost titans led the charge, unstoppable, cold, inexorable. Even chaos, long feared and hated, hesitated before her dominion. To them, she was a paradox, a mortal with power vast enough to rival gods, yet wielding it with restraint. To mortals, she was a queen, a mother, a savior, terrifying in her perfection, yet strangely comforting. The first stage of the Great Reformation was complete. The Imperium had been transformed, not by fire, but by frost. Yet, as the galaxy settled into uneasy harmony, Elsa knew the quiet was only temporary. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the warp stirred, waiting, testing, plotting. And when it struck, it would strike not at worlds, but at her. The stage was set, and the age of ice, though serene for now, would soon face the first test of its resolve. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the Dark Millennium.
The divisions among the Space Marines had begun to crystallize like frost on glass. The chapters that had accepted Elsa's authority adapted with discipline and precision. The Grey Knights, guided by their unwavering loyalty to humanity, acted as her psychic enforcers, rooting out remaining demonic threats with surgical efficiency. The Ultramarines, pragmatic as ever, integrated her strategies into their codex adherents, though murmurs of doubt lingered beneath their stoic expressions. But the Black Templars and Space Wolves resisted openly. To them, A ruler who wielded serenity instead of steel was an affront to honor, a weakening of humanity's martial backbone. The first open confrontation occurred in the void above Armageddon. The frozen eddies of Elsa's psychic influence had stabilized the warp currents. Yet a rebel fleet of Black Templar strike cruisers pushed through, banners blazing with zeal. They refused negotiation. Elsa's emissaries, Grey Knight commanders and Frostforged titans met them at the edge of the system. There was no malice in her voice, only inevitability. "Cease your rebellion," she said through the psychic lattice. "Your war is no longer required." Steel clashed with ice as the Black Templars, fanatical and unyielding, attempted to board the Titans. But Elsa had foreseen this. The Titans' shields, suffused with her psychic frost, stiffened like crystal armor against boarding torpedoes. Space Marines inside moved with professional precision, countering every assault with the calm expertise honed over centuries. Within hours, the Black Templars' leadership was neutralized, their ships frozen in suspended animation, unable to fire or maneuver. Elsa did not annihilate them. Instead, she encased their vessels in psychic ice, drifting them safely to orbit around Terra. Her punishment was paradoxically merciful, alive but unable to act against her rule. It was a message clear and chilling. Defiance was permitted, but ineffective. Meanwhile, the Adeptus Mechanicus crafted new tools to integrate further into Elsa's vision. Frost-based Auspex arrays tracked Xenos movements and warp disturbances with unparalleled accuracy. Cryogenic containment units preserved volatile demonic relics, while entire manufactorums were restructured to channel psychic energy into ice-enhanced weaponry. Mars itself hummed under her direction, a red planet cooled by frozen logic and purpose. But the galaxy was not without threats that could not be frozen. Tyranids, ever adaptable, arrived at the borders of human space, driven by hunger and instinct. High fleets advanced, tendrils laced with hardened chitin, moving toward worlds Elsa had already harmonized. Her frost titans met them, not in mindless slaughter, but in calculated suppression. Ice streams lanced across the bioorganic armor of Tyranid warriors, slowing their reflexes and disrupting synapse coordination. It was competence incarnate, war as precision engineering rather than chaos. The Hive Fleet's vanguard was contained, but at a cost. Worlds near the front froze under Elsa's frozen astronomonic, stabilizing populations, but leaving them barren of crops and life's warmth. Yet she justified it as a temporary sacrifice, a test of discipline, a refinement of humanity's adaptability. Closer to Terra, psychic disturbances began to grow. Elsa's choir of psychers, singing in frozen harmony, reported visions of entities beyond the warp surface, shadows that moved not with malice, but curiosity, whispers that hinted at rebellion, not of men, but of reality itself. The warp, once subdued, was awakening to her control, a subtle, escalating tension that only she could feel. On Prospero, thousands of psychers worked tirelessly, each session pushing their minds to integrate with the frozen astronomonic. Their voices, harmonized, became more than mere guidance. They became a psychic lattice enveloping entire systems. Ships navigated seamlessly, fleets coordinated flawlessly, and yet the strain on these minds began to show. Some whispered of madness, others of dreams where they were alone on an endless ice plain, the stars above frozen and indifferent. Elsa observed them, her own mind a mirror of calm, yet aware of the delicate balance she maintained. Even as she molded the Imperium, she knew the potential for corruption lay in subtle fractures.
Her calm was a shield, yes, but also a crucible. One misstep could shatter not only her empire, but the fragile psyche of all who depended upon it. The first crack in her serene dominion appeared in whispers from a distant world, Fenris. The Space Wolves, untouched by psychic harmonization, reported anomalous behavior in their ranks. Rage simmered higher than usual, visions of fire and blood mingling with the cold winds. Elsa foresaw the inevitability of confrontation, yet she did not fear it. The wolves were a test, a reminder that not all could be molded by ice and serenity. Her strategy, as always, was subtle. She did not confront the wolves directly. Instead, she allowed their aggression to funnel into controlled engagements along the outer reaches of Imperial space. There, her Titans and Grey Knights could guide outcomes with minimal human loss. Each battle became a demonstration of her philosophy: victory without chaos, precision without slaughter. And yet, every engagement, every subtle manipulation carried tension. The galaxy watched and waited, even as it did not realize it. Rebellion smoldered, Xenos lurked, and the warp whispered, impatient with its cage. Elsa's reign was not yet challenged by armies or demons, but by the very nature of existence, the unpredictability that no amount of psychic frost could fully contain. In the quiet moments, she walked the frozen corridors of the palace, listening to the sound of snow drifting through open arches and the faint hum of Titans in orbit. She was alone with her thoughts, the weight of millions of lives resting on her icy shoulders. Her serenity was a mantle, her discipline a weapon, and her loneliness a companion. For the first time, Elsa allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had brought order to chaos, peace to war, and clarity to confusion. Yet the galaxy, vast and unyielding, still whispered that her greatest challenge was yet to come. Comment your theories below. What corruption or Xenos threat will test Elsa's rule next?
The Frozen Crusade, as historians would one day call it, began not with fire, but with a glacial march. Elsa's forces moved across contested systems with the precision of a scalpel, leaving devastation only where it was necessary, and order wherever possible. Her Astartes, encased in ice-augmented armor, advanced with disciplined fluidity. Titans lumbered like colossal sentinels, their frost-laced cannons immobilizing enemy war engines before they could strike. Even the Xenos dared not attack recklessly, for the psychic lattice emanating from the Empress itself chilled both courage and chaos. Her first campaign beyond Terra targeted the fragmented remnants of the old Imperial Guard regiments, whose loyalties were fractured after the Emperor's failure. Many considered them obsolete, yet Elsa valued them for their experience, their hardened professionalism. She did not subjugate them with force, but with demonstration. Frozen rivers and psychic projections of impossible frost storms painted the Imperium's reach across the stars. As regimental commanders saw the inevitability of compliance, their hesitation melted like ice under firelight. Those who resisted found their lasguns misfiring, their armor seizing under sudden frost, their minds unnervingly calm in the face of psychic domination, unable to act rashly, unable to fight back. On the ice-bound world of Kolth, she orchestrated one of her first large-scale engagements. Orks, emboldened by centuries of imperial weakness, had made the planet a fortress of scrap and bone. Hundreds of thousands of greenskins swarmed its frozen plains, their war cries echoing across the tundra. Elsa's strategy was meticulous. She did not simply throw force at the enemy. Instead, she divided the battlefield into psychic zones, freezing terrain and enemy positions with subtle mental precision. Ice spikes erupted beneath orc stompers, their numbers thinned not through slaughter alone, but through careful manipulation of the battlefield. Her Astartes operated like conductors in a symphony of war, each squad moving as if guided by a single mind, which in fact they were. The vanguard, led by Captain Ardent of the Grey Knights, executed a flawless boarding maneuver against an orc dreadnought that had threatened the supply line. Ardent's team moved with competence so complete that it appeared choreographed. Every swing of a Nemesis Force weapon, every psychic incantation, every strike of frost-enhanced armor was in perfect synchrony. The dreadnought fell, immobilized and shattered, without a single Grey Knight casualty. Meanwhile, the Xenos watched from the void, studying this new form of human warfare. Hive mind synapses faltered under psychic frost, delaying the advance of smaller swarms. Elsa's interference had created a ripple effect across interstellar predator and prey alike. Even the orcs, whose crude brutality often defied reason, found themselves corralled by invisible barriers of cold. Yet, Elsa did not overextend. She knew the danger of hubris. As Kolth fell under her frozen dominion, she withdrew just enough to allow the orcs and Xenos to survive, to feel the futility of resistance. Her punishment was not merely military. It was philosophical, a lesson in inevitability. Still, the campaign revealed a vulnerability. Her psychic lattice, though vast, could not yet cover every system in real time. Small warp disturbances, subtle and fleeting, began appearing on the edge of her controlled territories. Demonic whispers seeped through, not strong enough to break her dominion, but enough to test the resilience of her army and her psychic choir. Back on Terra, the High Lords observed the campaigns with a mixture of awe and fear. They saw the efficiency of her methods, the harmony achieved without endless bloodshed, and yet they wondered if humanity's martial spirit would atrophy under such precise control. Some whispered that the galaxy needed war to survive, that without conflict, even Elsa's reign might become brittle. Elsa, however, paid them no mind. She walked through the ice-swept halls of the Palace of Frostlight, observing the synchronized psionic lattice pulsing across the stars. She had learned to anticipate dissent, to mold outcomes with subtlety rather than brute force. Each battle, each negotiation, each frozen planet was a testament to competence, strategy, and unyielding will. Still, beneath the surface of victory, tension simmered. Rebellions would rise, Xenos would advance, and the warp would stir. Elsa's reign was absolute in theory, but the universe was not static. Chaos, unpredictability, and mortality would test her, each in its own time. For now, however, the frozen crusade pressed forward, a demonstration of what humanity could achieve when united by cold clarity and psychic mastery. And so the galaxy watched in silence, awed, fearful, and unsettled, as Elsa's dominion extended mile by frozen mile across the stars. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the dark millennium.
The warp, long subdued beneath Elsa's psychic lattice, began to stir in subtle, unsettling ways. Her power had tamed it, silenced it, but not destroyed it. And in that silence, the demons themselves found a kind of frustration that was almost palpable. They whispered to one another across the void, a cacophony of discontent muffled by her frost. Yet even muffled, the whispers carried intelligence, curiosity, envy, and a growing dread of this mortal who dared shape the galaxy in ice and serenity. It was on a distant imperial world, Vadris Prime, that the first tangible evidence of this awakening appeared. A small mining colony, abandoned due to excessive warp turbulence, reported visions. Not the usual screams or convulsions of psychic corruption, but clear, deliberate communications from entities beyond comprehension. They called her name. Some miners died, their minds frozen mid-thought, while others awoke with strange clarity, able to manipulate minor frost phenomena at will. These were not ordinary warp touches. They were signs that Elsa's lattice had resonated with something larger, something ancient that was now aware. On Terra, the news reached the Empress in her throne room. The air shimmered faintly with her psychic frost as she considered the implications. She did not panic. Elsa's mind was trained for calculations beyond human capacity. She saw the disturbance as a variable in a vast equation, and yet even for her, this was unprecedented. "The warp grows uneasy," she murmured, her voice a calm blade slicing the tension of the room. Kaelas Vir, standing beside her, bowed. "Shall we strike preemptively, Majesty?" Elsa's gaze was steady, almost melancholy. "No, this is not aggression, it is observation. Let it learn we are not to be trifled with, but also that we do not strike without cause." She dispatched the Arch-Seraph Amelia to coordinate with the choir of psychers, amplifying the lattice's reach to monitor warp fluctuations across the sector. Thousands of sanctioned psychers became nodes in a web that extended farther than ever before, their minds interwoven with Elsa's own. Every anomaly, every ripple of daimonic presence was recorded, analyzed, and catalogued. Yet the warp, cunning and patient, began to adapt. Small, almost imperceptible tremors spread, testing her control, probing for weaknesses. Meanwhile, a cadre of space marines, loyal to the Empress yet highly independent, were sent to investigate the disturbances. Among them was Captain Ardent, whose earlier exploits on Calth had earned him both her favor and her trust. He led his strike force into the mining world's frozen tunnels, where icicle stalactites hung like daggers, and the ground seemed to hum with psychic resonance. They encountered nothing at first, only the eerie stillness of a world caught between life and stasis. And then the demons appeared, not in great hordes, not with roaring fire and blood-soaked banners, but as subtle, whispering forms, shapes that flickered in and out of reality, frozen, almost mid-motion, their eyes gleaming with curiosity rather than rage. The Astartes moved with discipline, precision, yet even their trained instincts faltered under the unnatural chill. Every strike of their weapons seemed muted, the creatures vanished and reappeared like frost ghosts. Captain Ardent realized quickly that this was no ordinary engagement. The demons were testing them, observing the lattice, learning, adapting. He called upon his squad's psychic support, coordinated strikes and frost-enhanced grenades, and yet the creatures persisted, almost laughing silently at the futility of conventional tactics. The battle became a dance, a slow, tense engagement where understanding and strategy mattered more than brute force. Back on Terra, Elsa felt the strain in her mind. Each daimonic ripple tugged at the psychic lattice, challenging her control. Yet her calm did not waver. She extended her influence subtly, freezing minor fluctuations, guiding her Astartes remotely with silent gestures of thought. Ardent's squad followed her direction instinctively, moving as though her will was a tangible force guiding them through the frozen chaos. The miners, meanwhile, watched from the tunnels, paralyzed by fear and awe. Some sensed that the Empress herself was present, though invisible. Others whispered that her presence
disturbance was the ice itself, an omnipresent force reshaping reality with a patience and precision beyond mortal comprehension. By the time the engagement concluded, the demons had been repelled, not destroyed, but contained. The warp's tendrils had tested the lattice and found themselves momentarily frozen, suspended in psychic equilibrium. Arden's forces returned, battle-worn but intact, reporting the encounter as unprecedented. Elsa acknowledged their report silently, allowing the satisfaction to remain internal. She knew this was only the beginning. The warp had been challenged, its patience tested, and now it would adapt. Every encounter, every psychic disturbance, every minor rebellion was a step in a larger equation. Elsa's serene dominion had expanded, but with each expansion came new tensions, new variables that she would need to master. And in the darkness between stars, something watched and waited. The entities within the warp were learning that the galaxy had a new ruler, one who commanded not with fire, but with frost, not with rage, but with serenity. Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul. More psychic intrigue and frost-bound conflict lie ahead.
The psychic currents drew a singular figure closer to Elsa's lattice, a presence both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Magnus the Red, the Crimson Sorcerer of Prospero. Long had he wandered the stars, seeking understanding, power, and a chance to reshape the Imperium in his own vision. Yet Elsa's influence had reached even him, a psychic signal of such purity and precision that it demanded attention. The warp trembled in her presence, and Magnus, ever perceptive, sensed something extraordinary. A mortal wielding order over the chaos that had consumed the galaxy for 10 millennia. Magnus approached cautiously, aboard a void ship carved from crimson glass and etched with protective runes. His mind, a conduit of psychic fire and foresight, probed the lattice and found it unlike anything he had ever encountered. Elsa's psychic frost was paradoxical, simultaneously a restraint and a weapon, a shield and a spear. It did not seek to dominate or destroy the warp. It guided it, disciplined it, shaped it. And yet, despite its elegance, it was not without danger. One misstep, one lapse of concentration, and the lattice could collapse, or, worse, consume the user. Elsa awaited him in the throne room of Frostlight. Her presence filled the chamber like a tangible aura, the temperature dropping several degrees as her psychic energy radiated outward. The Grey Knights flanked her, their armor inlaid with frost crystals humming faintly in resonance with her own mind. Titans loomed silently beyond, their eyes glowing like frozen suns, ready to act at the slightest threat. "Magnus," Elsa said, her voice calm and unwavering, "you have come far." The Crimson Sorcerer bowed slightly, his expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I did not come lightly," he admitted. "Your lattice, it challenges the natural order. The warp itself reacts to your will. Few mortals have ever commanded such power without destroying themselves." Elsa's gaze did not waver. "And yet I endure. The galaxy does not need destruction, Magnus. It needs clarity." Magnus studied her, noting the faint aura of frost that clung to her form. It was not merely a psychic signature, it was a philosophy, embodied. He recognized a discipline born not of fear, but of absolute control over self and universe alike. Yet he was cautious. Power of this magnitude always demanded respect, but also suspicion. "You have harmonized humanity, yet what of those who resist? The Black Templars, the Wolves, and even the Warp itself. Your lattice may hold, but for how long?" Elsa smiled faintly. Control is not permanence. Even ice melts when the sun rises, yet properly tempered, it can last longer than the fire of war. Magnus considered her words, then gestured toward a holographic projection of the galaxy. Systems under her psychic influence shimmered with pale blue energy, frozen in perfect alignment. Rebel fleets, Xenos incursions, minor warp anomalies, all were contained within her lattice, harmonized with uncanny precision. "Your vision is remarkable," he admitted. "I have fought daemons and heretics alike, yet never have I encountered a mind so vast, so disciplined." Elsa inclined her head. "And yet I am only mortal. The warp is patient. It observes, it tests. My lattice is not impenetrable." Magnus nodded, understanding the implicit challenge. He had faced beings who believed themselves absolute and found that arrogance deadly. He saw in Elsa not arrogance, but an unyielding resolve tempered by wisdom and discipline. It was rare and dangerous. For the next cycle, they walked together through the throne room, discussing matters of psychic theory, strategic philosophy, and the future of the Imperium. Magnus shared insights into the warp, demonic hierarchies, and the subtle interplay of psychic energies. Elsa, in turn, demonstrated the lattice's harmonization of planets and psychers, revealing how she channeled psychic frost into a stabilizing force. The Crimson Sorcerer was fascinated. Yet even as they spoke, subtle tremors in the warp warned of growing unrest. The lattice had stabilized countless systems, yet far beyond its reach, the influence of chaos whispered still. Magnus sensed it: minor incursion points, demon scouts testing boundaries, corruption attempting to infiltrate the edges of her domain. Elsa was aware of these stirrings, yet she remained calm. Her lattice was flexible, capable of adapting, anticipating, and countering. "You will need allies," Magnus said finally. "Not merely soldiers or psychers, but those who understand the complexities of both war and the warp. You cannot do this alone." Elsa considered this, her breath crystallizing faintly in the air. "I do not seek to dominate or conquer. I seek harmony. But allies, yes. Knowledge is the only true weapon." Thus, an uneasy alliance was formed. Magnus, intrigued and cautious, would lend his insight and power to Elsa's vision. In return, he would learn from her mastery of discipline and control, knowledge he could not acquire elsewhere. Together, they would face the rising challenges of rebellion, Xenos incursions, and the ever-looming threat of demonic intervention. And yet, as Magnus departed to coordinate with the fleets under her lattice, Elsa felt a subtle, chilling awareness. Even with his counsel, the galaxy remained unpredictable. The warp itself was not yet fully subdued. Daemons had learned, Xenos had adapted, and humanity, even guided by serenity and peace, remained fallible. The stage was set for the first great test of the Frozen Crusade, an encounter not merely of armies, but of minds, will, and cosmic forces. Elsa, calm and calculating, understood that the coming conflict would reveal not only the strength of her lattice, but the limits of her own endurance.
The first true test of Elsa's dominion came from the void itself. Reports arrived from the Segmentum Obscurus. Entire star systems had gone silent, their Vox transmissions cut off mid-sentence. Fleets, dispatched to investigate, found worlds seemingly frozen in time, cities halted mid-motion, and populations suspended in psychic stasis. The warp was acting unpredictably, responding not with violence, but with an eerie mimicry of Elsa's own methods. It had learned, or at least adapted, to her lattice. The anomalies centered around a dead star system known as Cryos Vale, where long-abandoned research stations dotted the void. Elsa sensed immediately that the disturbance was both a threat and an opportunity. She dispatched her trusted strike force, Grey Knights, Frost Titans, and Astartes from compliant chapters. Among them was Captain Ardent, whose experience on Kulth had proven invaluable. This mission would require more than brute force. It demanded intelligence, precision, and adaptability. Upon arrival, the fleet encountered something unexpected. The worlds themselves seemed alive. Ice storms erupted spontaneously in orbit, asteroids levitated and froze mid-spin, and psychic echoes of past inhabitants lingered like spectral frost. The warp had manifested as an entity of its own, shaping matter and energy to reflect Elsa's own methods, yet distorted by chaos. These were not demons in the traditional sense, nor were they fully natural. They were anomalies, frozen reflections of her lattice, corrupted by the ambient chaos of the void. Elsa's approach was calm, calculated. Through the lattice, she reached out psychically, probing the anomalies with careful precision. The Frost Titans moved in concert with her mind, their weapons targeting subtle weaknesses in the frozen manifestations. Grey Knights coordinated strikes in perfect synchronicity, cutting through the warped frost forms with both psychic power and disciplined steel. Captain Ardent realized quickly that conventional tactics would fail. Each strike was countered, each advance anticipated. Elsa's lattice guided them, freezing certain anomalies while allowing others to dissipate naturally. It was as if the warp were testing her own philosophy. Could order exist in a universe inherently chaotic? The battle unfolded like a chess game on a cosmic scale. Titans unleashed frost lances that carved through the warped ice storms, while Astartes executed maneuvers refined to near-perfect efficiency. Elsa's psychic presence was the unseen hand guiding every movement, every decision, every moment. Yet the anomaly responded, adapting to each tactic with subtle, disconcerting intelligence. It was learning, evolving, and resisting, a reflection of both her power and the chaotic universe that opposed it. On the ground, Psykers worked tirelessly to harmonize the lattice with the unstable systems. Their chants and psychic resonance reinforced Elsa's control, stabilizing areas of chaos long enough for the fleets to act. Yet even among them, tension rose. Some began to sense the anomaly as a conscious presence, capable of observing and predicting their every move. Whispered warnings of madness and corruption spread, though the lattice dampened panic before it could escalate. Elsa remained focused, her mind a calm beacon in the storm. She allowed herself no hesitation, no doubt. Every observation was recorded, every psychic fluctuation noted. She was not merely fighting the anomaly, she was studying it, understanding its behavior, and preparing to integrate that knowledge into the lattice itself. By the campaign's conclusion, the anomaly was not destroyed. It could not be, but it was contained, its influence neutralized, and the worlds of Cryos Vale stabilized. Elsa had demonstrated that her control over the warp was formidable, yet imperfect. The warp, in all its patient cunning, remained a force to be respected, feared, and understood. On Terra, Elsa debriefed with her council. Magnus, ever perceptive, noted the subtle adaptations of the anomaly. "It learned from you," he said. "The warp is reflecting your methods, a frozen echo. This is both impressive and dangerous. It will not forget." Elsa nodded, her expression calm but resolute. "Then we learn from it. Adaptation is inevitable. Perfection is a process, not a state." And so the first major test of the Frozen Crusade concluded not with victory in the traditional sense, but with the reaffirmation of Elsa's philosophy. Control is not annihilation, and order is not dominion over chaos, but mastery of restraint. The galaxy watched in silent awe. Rebellions paused, fleets hesitated, and Xenos observers retreated. Even the warp seemed cautious, as if recognizing that the Age of Ice was no mere temporary interlude, but a new paradigm. The stage was set for even greater challenges: insurgent chapters, rogue psychers, and entities of the warp itself, all converging upon a galaxy slowly bending under Elsa's calm, relentless vision. Still with us in the darkness? Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul. The Frozen Crusade's trials have only begun.
The next challenge arose not from the warp, nor from distant Xenos, but from within humanity itself. On the ice-blanketed hive world of Glacis Secundus, whispers of dissent had begun to grow. Unlike the open rebellion of the Black Templars or the feral defiance of the Space Wolves, this was subtle, insidious. Bureaucrats, planetary governors, and minor nobles quietly questioning Elsa's philosophy. They feared the stagnation of humanity, the erosion of martial spirit, and the moral implications of a ruler who froze not just matter, but ambition, fear, and hope. Elsa observed these stirrings with her usual calm. She did not act rashly. Instead, she allowed the dissent to reveal itself, monitored its patterns, and prepared a demonstration of control that would be both precise and instructive. Her emissaries arrived first, Grey Knights and Frost Titans, not to destroy, but to show. The population of Glacis Secundus gathered in the city squares, wary and anxious, as Elsa projected her presence across the psychic lattice. Her voice, calm and authoritative, rippled through their minds. "You fear stagnation, yet you do not act. I offer clarity, not command. I offer restraint, not weakness. You may rebel, but your defiance will be a lesson, not an end." The demonstration was subtle but undeniable. Frost-crested spires rose from the city streets, forming patterns that reflected Elsa's lattice in miniature. Citizens could move freely, yet a sense of discipline pervaded their minds. Actions became deliberate, coordinated, precise. Those who resisted found their thoughts slowed, their impulses chilled, until panic or rashness became impossible. Even minor acts of sabotage froze in execution, undone by unseen forces. Elsa's methods were not cruelty, they were pedagogy on a planetary scale. She wanted them to understand, not merely obey. Yet the lesson was absolute. The Age of Ice allowed no chaos to flourish unchecked. Meanwhile, a contingent of space marines loyal to the old doctrines, secretly arriving from distant systems, attempted to rally resistance. Black Templar banners were unfurled, bolter fire echoed in narrow streets, and the first sparks of combat flared. Yet Elsa anticipated every move. Frost-enhanced titans immobilized vehicles before they could act. Grey Knights projected psychic barriers that encased squads mid-advance. The rebels found themselves trapped in a choreography they could not control, their martial skill rendered ineffective by Elsa's calm, precise guidance. Captain Ardent, observing the scene, noted the unique competence of this engagement. Unlike traditional battlefield control, which relied on destruction and intimidation, Elsa's lattice imposed discipline and restraint. Every strike, every movement was directed not to kill, but to contain, to correct, to educate. For Ardent, it was both awe-inspiring and unsettling, a war fought entirely within the mind, yet made manifest in the physical world. By the end of the campaign, the insurgents were neither destroyed nor exiled. They were contained, their power neutralized by psychic harmonization and disciplined guidance. They had learned the futility of rebellion in Elsa's presence, not through fear, but through inevitable order. Glacis Secundus, once a hub of whispered discontent, now functioned in perfect synchronization with the lattice, a model world demonstrating the principles of the Frozen Crusade. Yet Elsa was not naive. She knew dissent could not be eradicated entirely. Humanity was unpredictable, and the warp remained an ever-present variable. These rebellions, minor though they were reminders that even the most disciplined systems required vigilance. She began compiling reports, analyzing behavioral patterns, and preparing countermeasures, all while maintaining her outward calm. It was also during this time that Magnus the Red returned, having observed Elsa's methods from afar and consulted with his own networks of psychic perception. He offered insight into the subtle vulnerabilities he detected within the lattice, areas where overconfidence could lead to psychic fatigue, zones where concentrated dissent could destabilize nodes, and weaknesses that only a cunning adversary could exploit. Elsa listened, absorbing every nuance, and refined the lattice further, reinforcing critical systems while allowing minor flexibility to accommodate human unpredictability. The lesson of Glacis Secundus reverberated across the Imperium. Worlds began to emulate its structure, consciously or subconsciously. Psychic harmonization became a method for governance. Frost-enhanced discipline replaced fear-driven compliance. Even rebellious factions began to hesitate before acting, aware that Elsa's lattice was both omnipresent and adaptive. But in quiet moments, the Empress considered the ultimate test. The warp, Xenos, and rebels had all been measured, restrained, and contained, but she knew there existed a force beyond comprehension, one that would not submit to discipline or reason. The greatest threat to her vision, she realized, might not be a fleet, a demon, or a mutinous chapter, but the unpredictable chaos of the universe. Still, she remained serene. She had faced resistance, tested the lattice, and proven her philosophy in both strategy and compassion. And for the first time in millennia, she allowed herself to consider not the threats of the galaxy, but the potential of its harmony. comment below. How do you think Elsa will handle the ultimate threat lurking in the warp? Elsa's vision for the Imperium continued to expand, but the most formidable challenges were emerging not in the physical realm, but in the psychic. Reports of warp anomalies multiplied, not randomly, but in clusters, as though a hidden hand was testing the lattice. These disturbances were subtle, unlike the open rebellion of mortals or the raw aggression of Xenos. They were deliberate probes, small daimonic agents sent to observe, analyze, and, if possible, exploit. Elsa named them Echoes of Discord, manifestations that mirrored her lattice but corrupted it just enough to unsettle the unwary. The first major encounter occurred on the ice-shrouded planet of Cryon 5, a world formerly abandoned due to excessive warp turbulence. A lone contingent of Grey Knights, reinforced by frost-forged titans, had been dispatched to investigate. Captain Ardent led the operation, his squad trained to the pinnacle of discipline, every movement executed with a precision bordering on the inhuman. Yet even their competence was tested by the subtlety of the echoes. Unlike traditional daemons, the echoes did not attack directly. They mirrored the lattice, creating frozen duplicates of ships, psychic distortions of terrain, and spectral illusions of Astartes who had not yet fallen. Each encounter was a mental puzzle. Strike too soon and the echo dissipated, reforming elsewhere. Hesitate, and the echoes began to manipulate environmental conditions, freezing systems, altering gravity, and destabilizing psychic networks. It was not merely war. It was a contest of perception, intellect, and psychic resilience. Elsa coordinated remotely through the lattice, her presence guiding Ardent's squad with subtle nudges of thought. She froze select anomalies mid-motion, redirected psychic currents, and allowed her forces to anticipate attacks that were, in essence, impossible to predict. It was a demonstration of both her mastery and the lattice's adaptability. Each member of Ardent's team acted with perfect competence, moving as extensions of Elsa's will rather than independent agents. Yet even in victory, tension escalated. The echoes learned from each engagement. They adapted to psychic interference, exploited minor lapses, and began testing the lattice in ways that Elsa had not anticipated. Her calm, while unbroken, masked the fact that this was the first truly unpredictable opponent she had faced. Unlike mortals or Xenos, these anomalies were reflections of her own power, intelligent, patient, and relentless. On Terra, Elsa convened a council with Magnus the Red and her senior commanders. The Crimson Sorcerer had been observing the anomalies through his own networks of warp perception and offered insights that only a daemon-experienced mind could provide. They are mirrors of your lattice, Elsa, not mindless chaos, but adaptive intelligence. They learn as you act, Elsa. One day they will anticipate even you. Elsa nodded, her breath forming frost in the chamber's air. Then we will adapt faster. Intelligence is not strength alone. It is preparation, anticipation, and patience. We have all three. Plans were drawn. Grey Knights would act as psychic anchors, Titan battalions as kinetic stabilizers, and newly trained psychers would serve as liaisons, extending the lattice's influence into the anomaly zones.
Every strike, every adjustment, every freeze or harmonic resonance was calculated to both contain and study the echoes. The first engagement was brutal yet precise. The echoes twisted environmental hazards into lethal tools. Frozen spires of ice impaled drones, psychic distortions warped terrain, and illusory enemies lured squads into traps. Yet Elsa's lattice anticipated nearly every maneuver, directing her forces to counteract with an almost prescient understanding. Titan plasma cannons vaporized illusionary constructions, Grey Knights dispelled psychic distortions, and Ardent Squad moved with unwavering coordination, each act a testament to competence incarnate. By the end of the campaign, Cryon 5 was secured, the echoes contained, and the lattice had absorbed valuable intelligence. Elsa had learned more about her adversary in weeks than most commanders could in lifetimes. Yet the tension remained palpable. These were not mere rebels or Xenos. They were embodiments of a psychic feedback loop, a test of her will and her philosophy. Elsa reflected on the implications. The lattice was powerful, yet it had limitations. For the first time, she realized that mastery was not about control alone. It was about adaptation. The galaxy, with its Xenos, rebels, and warp-born anomalies, was a living system, dynamic, unpredictable, and infinitely patient. And she, though formidable, would need to evolve alongside it. The Frozen Crusade had faced its first trial of intelligence and subtlety. The echoes of discord were contained, yes, but their lesson was clear. The Age of Ice was not invulnerable, and Elsa's calm would be tested in ways that fire, steel, and frost alone could not resolve. Comment below. Do you think Elsa can adapt faster than the warp itself, or are hatred destined to be her downfall?
The containment of the echoes of discord had brought both relief and a sobering realization. Elsa's lattice, for all its power, was being studied by the warp itself. Her psychic frost could anticipate and immobilize armies, harmonize systems, and neutralize rebels. But these anomalies were adaptive. They responded to her methods, mirrored her philosophy, and in some cases, anticipated her intentions. The enemy had become a reflection, a warped, unpredictable reflection, and Elsa understood that the next confrontation would test more than skill. It would test her ingenuity. The next theater of conflict emerged in the Segmentum Tempestus, a cluster of star systems long plagued by Ork incursions. What made this situation unique was not the Orks themselves, but the symbiosis they had unknowingly developed with minor warp disturbances. Mutant Ork shamans had begun experimenting with rudimentary psychic resonance, creating frost-resistant battle platforms that defied even Elsa's lattice in minor skirmishes. These platforms did not threaten the lattice directly, but they revealed that Xenos could evolve under its influence, adapting their brute force strategies to Elsa's discipline-based methods. Elsa did not act rashly. She observed, calculated, and devised a counter-strategy of combined subtlety with overwhelming competence. Her forces moved like a single organism across space. Titan battalions crushed environmental hazards, frost-forged voidcraft cut off Ork supply lines, and squads of Astartes executed strikes so synchronized they seemed prescient. Ardent, leading a multi-chaptered task force, noted that every unit's movements reflected Elsa's will rather than individual initiative, a precise ballet of combat honed to perfection. But the Ork shamans were unpredictable. They manipulated minor warp currents, creating localized frost storms that disrupted targeting systems and slowed the lattice's response. Elsa's psychic frost met the Orcs' ingenuity with adaptive precision. She isolated each shaman, directing Grey Knights and elite Astartes to contain them without unnecessary slaughter, demonstrating her philosophy that control was more valuable than destruction. The clash of competence, mortal and Xenos ingenuity against calculated strategy, defined the campaign. Amid this chaos, Elsa introduced a new element: the cryo-archivists, elite psychers trained specifically to record, analyze, and predict adaptive behavior. These individuals became extensions of the lattice, processing the Orcs' evolutionary patterns in real time and providing predictive models to guide battlefield strategy. Where the Orcs had evolved by trial and error, Elsa adapted preemptively, turning their own ingenuity against them. The climactic battle occurred on the ice-covered plains of Regal Prime. Orc war engines advanced, shielded by their frost-altered modifications, while shamans coordinated minor psychic incursions. Elsa's Titans advanced, synchronized with the lattice, projecting waves of psychic frost that froze the engines in mid-motion. Astartes squads struck at precisely calculated points, disarming and disabling vehicles without unnecessary casualties. The Orcs, bewildered by this methodical control, found themselves corralled like beasts in a cage they could neither break nor escape. As the campaign concluded, Elsa reflected on the broader implications. The Imperium was becoming more efficient, more harmonious, yet the universe remained a living, breathing crucible of unpredictability. Every success was both a victory and a lesson. Every adaptation of the enemy was an opportunity to evolve further. And somewhere in the distant void, the echoes of discord were watching, recording, and learning, preparing for the moment when Elsa's lattice might finally be challenged in ways neither mortals nor demons could yet predict. Comment your theories below. Will Elsa's lattice withstand the next unforeseen threat, or will the galaxy's chaos find a way to strike?
Elsa's dominion had expanded across multiple sectors, yet the universe continued to remind her that even the most disciplined lattice was not invincible. The next challenge arrived not from rebellion or orcs, but from the Tyranids, a force of predatory intelligence that operated on instinct, adaptation, and overwhelming numbers. Hive Fleet Obsidian had been detected near the edge of the Segmentum Solar, its tendrils moving with unrelenting precision toward human worlds. This was a threat unlike any Elsa had faced before. No subtlety could deter them, no frost could halt their biological hunger. She convened a council on Terra, bringing together Magnus the Red, Captain Ardent, and representatives of compliant Space Marine chapters. Their task was clear: contain the Hive Fleet without unnecessary devastation, preserving both life and infrastructure wherever possible. Elsa's lattice would guide them, yet the Tyranids' adaptation posed a unique problem. Where the Orcs had been cunning, the Tyranids were instinct incarnate, learning and mutating far faster than even the lattice could initially anticipate. The first encounter occurred in orbit above the industrial world of Raxus Prime. Titans, augmented with psychic frost, advanced in formation, coordinating with fleet elements to create zones of immobilization.
Tyranid bioships struck with overwhelming numbers, yet Elsa's lattice anticipated their approach, freezing key synapse nodes in mid-attack and redirecting swarms into containment corridors. Ardent strike teams moved with surgical precision, targeting exocrine nodes and synapse beasts to disrupt the hive mind's coordination. Despite the lattice's guidance, tensions escalated. Tyranid mutability allowed the hive fleet to adapt, developing bioshields resistant to psychic frost and altering attack patterns in real time. Elsa responded by refining the lattice mid-engagement, rechanneling psychic energy through newly integrated cryo-archivists. Each adjustment was subtle yet profound. Ice currents redirected, psychic signals amplified, and fleet formations shifted with preternatural synchronization. The Tyranids, relentless and instinct-driven, began to falter. On the ground, Psykers coordinated with Imperial Guard units, guiding them through frozen choke points where Tyranid organisms were immobilized by Elsa's lattice. Lasguns and meltaguns struck with unparalleled efficiency, while Titan support neutralized monstrous bioforms before they could overwhelm the defenders. Competence, discipline, and adaptation coalesced into a demonstration of what Elsa's philosophy truly represented: victory achieved through harmony rather than chaos. Yet even as the battle concluded, Elsa sensed a lingering threat. Hive Fleet Obsidian had not been destroyed, merely delayed. Its synapse nodes had learned from the lattice, recording the patterns of psychic frost and strategic precision. Elsa understood that their return was inevitable, and when it came, they would be more dangerous than ever. Magnus observed the aftermath, noting the subtle intelligence of the Tyranid adaptations. He said, "They are learning, not through reason, but through evolution. Each encounter strengthens them in ways your lattice cannot yet fully anticipate." Elsa considered this, her expression calm but contemplative. She said, "Then we will adapt faster. Intelligence is not static, and neither is discipline. The lattice evolves with every engagement, so too must we." In the weeks that followed, Elsa expanded the lattice's reach, integrating new psychic nodes, refining predictive algorithms, and preparing Imperial forces for the next inevitable confrontation. Worlds previously considered stable became monitoring points. Fleets patrolled with enhanced coordination, and Psykers trained in adaptive warfare extended the lattice's subtle influence even into warp corridors. Despite the success, the tension remained. The Tyranids had tested the lattice in ways subtle yet profound, revealing both its power and its limits. Elsa knew that the universe would not relent, that every victory was merely a prelude to the next challenge. But she also knew that with discipline, strategy, and psychic foresight, even the most unpredictable threats could be anticipated, contained, and when necessary, harmonized. As she walked through the frozen corridors of her command palace aboard the orbiting fortress above Raxus Prime, Elsa allowed herself a moment of reflection. The lattice had proven its worth, yet the galaxy remained a living, breathing test of her philosophy. Order, discipline, and serenity were her tools, but vigilance would remain her constant companion. The Frozen Crusade had faced its first organic adversary of unparalleled scale, and survived. Yet in the depths of the warp, unseen entities recorded, adapted, and waited. Comment below. How will Elsa adapt when even the Hive Fleet itself learns faster than the lattice?
As the Tyranid threat receded temporarily, Elsa turned her attention to the insidious forces lurking within the warp itself. The echoes of discord, the subtle anomalies that had first tested her lattice, had begun to coalesce into something far more dangerous. A semi-conscious entity capable of manipulating psychic resonance on a galaxy-wide scale. Unlike daemons that acted through raw violence, this new presence worked through imitation, reflection, and subtlety. It was a shadow of Elsa's lattice, a mirror corrupted by the inherent chaos of the warp. The first signs appeared on Vrinus 9th, a planet used for psyker training and lattice research. Normally, students learn to harmonize minor frost-based phenomena with Elsa's guidance, but reports indicated disturbances, psychic tremors that synchronized with the lattice's own signals, subtle inversions of intent, and ephemeral whispers that hinted at malevolent intelligence. By the time the Imperial forces arrived, entire classrooms were immobilized in psychic stasis, frozen mid-action, as if the planet itself hesitated under the new presence. Elsa responded with calm precision. She did not strike blindly. Instead, she extended the lattice deeper into the warp, probing, isolating, and analyzing the anomalies. Grey Knights, led by Captain Ardent, were dispatched as psychic anchors, while Frost Titans and Astartes moved in synchronized formations to secure the planet. Their movements were guided directly by Elsa's will, each action a deliberate counter to the entity's subtle manipulations. What made this confrontation unique was the intelligence of the adversary. Unlike orcs, heretics, or daemons, this new semi-conscious warp entity anticipated Elsa's methods, mirrored her lattice, and adapted in real time. Initial strikes that had succeeded against echoes and high fleet minions failed or were partially countered. Even her most disciplined psychers found their efforts resisted, their spells inverted or redirected by the entity's warped mimicry. Elsa remained serene. She allowed the anomalies to manifest fully, observing their patterns, recording their strategies, and calculating countermeasures. Every psychic tremor, every echo of frost was data, an opportunity to refine the lattice. She directed her forces not to destroy the entity outright, but to contain and study it, turning its intelligence against itself. The battle escalated across the planet and into orbit. Warped, distorted spires rose from the surface, channeling psychic energy into frozen constructs. Fleets in orbit found their sensors disrupted, communications twisted by the entity's interference. Yet every response Elsa orchestrated was precise. Titans fired with timing calibrated to the millisecond. Astarte squads moved in flawless formation, and psychers harmonized local lattices to nullify the warp distortions. Captain Ardent observed the unfolding operations with a mixture of awe and apprehension. He had fought against Xenos, heretics, and daemons, but never an enemy that learned directly from his commander's mind. Each strike was countered not by brute force, but by anticipation and mimicry. Yet under Elsa's guidance, they pressed forward, gradually isolating the entity's influence and reducing its ability to act freely. By the end of the engagement, Vrinus 9th was stabilized, though not without cost. The entity had been contained, not destroyed, and Elsa's lattice had absorbed vast amounts of information on its methods. She realized that this was only the beginning. A truly intelligent, adaptive warp presence would require constant vigilance, and even her unparalleled discipline could not predict every outcome. Magnus the Red, having monitored the battle psychically, arrived to offer insight.
This entity, it is more than mere echo. It is a reflection of your own power, Elsa. If left unchecked, it could rival the lattice itself, bending reality in ways even you cannot fully control. Elsa nodded, her breath crystallizing faintly in the chamber. Then we will evolve. The lattice learns as we do. Every encounter strengthens it, refines it, and prepares us for what is to come. The tension in the Imperium was palpable. Planets watched as Elsa's forces demonstrated unparalleled competence, yet the galaxy knew that a true test was approaching. The echoes of discord now evolved when no longer minor disturbances. They were a semi-conscious adversary capable of challenging the very principles of the Frozen Crusade. In the silent corridors of the Palace of Frostlight, Elsa allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had tamed armies, harmonized planets, and contained adaptive threats. Yet the warp, ever patient, had introduced an opponent that mirrored her own philosophy, forcing her to confront the limits of control, foresight, and discipline. The Frozen Crusade had reached a pivotal point. The galaxy watched, the warp tested, and Elsa prepared for an adversary that could, in time, match even her intelligence.
The warning signs had become impossible to ignore. Across multiple sectors, psychic tremors echoed through the lattice, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The semi-conscious warp entity, now named the Mirror of Frost, was no longer contained. It had learned not merely to imitate, but to manipulate. Probing weaknesses, exploiting minor inconsistencies, and testing Elsa's own methods against her. The mirror had become a predator, and Elsa, for the first time in her reign, sensed a challenge that could rival her unmatched discipline. Her response was methodical. She convened a council with Magnus the Red, Captain Ardent, and her senior Psyker advisors, devising a plan that combined offensive precision with defensive harmonization. Fleets would secure strategic points in affected systems. Titans would establish psychic amplifiers, and the lattice itself would extend into the warp more aggressively than ever before. Yet even in planning, Elsa remained calm. Every calculation, every contingency had been considered. The first engagement took place on the world of Cryovast, a frigid industrial planet whose mining complexes had been abandoned due to minor warp instability. The Mirror of Frost had seized these complexes as a foothold, projecting illusory constructs and psychic traps designed to disorient and delay her forces. Ardent strike teams moved cautiously, their movements guided by Elsa's lattice with near-prescient precision. Every step was measured, every strike deliberate, yet the mirror anticipated with unnerving accuracy, warping terrain, freezing machinery mid-operation, and creating illusory reinforcements. Elsa extended her psychic frost directly into the mirror's projections, probing for weaknesses and analyzing its adaptive patterns. Each anomaly she corrected revealed subtle imperfections, a delayed response, a pattern repetition, a trace of the entity's emergent consciousness. She directed Ardent's forces to exploit these flaws with surgical precision. Titans immobilized warped structures, Psychers disrupted psychic distortions, and Astartes squad struck at precisely calculated points, reducing the mirror's influence incrementally. What distinguished this engagement from all previous battles was the level of competence required. Ordinary strategies were ineffective. Even elite psychers needed guidance. Every action was part of a broader choreography orchestrated by Elsa's lattice. Yet through discipline, observation, and adaptation, her forces gradually imposed order over the chaos. The mirror resisted, but it could not anticipate the lattice's capacity to learn in real time. Magnus observed psychically from a void ship in orbit, noting the elegance of Elsa's approach. He said, "It is learning from you, but it is still limited by its reflection of your own methods. Its strength lies in imitation, not innovation. Exploit that." Elsa nodded, her mind calculating multiple contingencies simultaneously. She introduced deliberate deviations into the lattice, subtle shifts in tactics designed to confound the mirror's predictive algorithms. The entity responded with confusion, fracturing its projections and weakening its control over Cryovast's infrastructure. Ardent's teams pressed forward, taking advantage of each momentary lapse, neutralizing psychic traps and stabilizing zones of the lattice that had been temporarily compromised. By the conclusion of the campaign, Cryovast was secure. The Mirror of Frost had been contained, its projections dispersed, and its intelligence partially mapped for study. Yet Elsa knew this was only a temporary victory. The entity's adaptability meant that it would return, stronger, more cunning, and potentially capable of challenging the lattice in unforeseen ways. In the quiet aftermath, Elsa addressed her council. She said, "The mirror is a reflection of our methods, not a master of them. Every engagement teaches us, strengthens the lattice, and prepares us for the next confrontation. Patience and adaptation are our greatest weapons. One day we may face it not as a reflection, but as a force beyond prediction. When that day comes, we must be ready." The tension in the Imperium remained high. Worlds watched as Elsa's forces demonstrated unparalleled competence. Yet even allies understood the stakes. The Mirror of Frost was no ordinary threat. It was an emergent intelligence, a reflection of Elsa herself, capable of challenging the principles upon which her frozen crusade was built. Comment below. What strategies would you use if your enemy could predict your every move?
The Mirror of Frost had retreated, but its presence lingered like a frost in the warp, a reminder that Elsa's dominion, however vast, was neither absolute nor unchallenged. The galaxy, a living crucible of chaos, xenos, and mortal ambition, had now presented her with an adversary that mirrored her every thought, anticipated her every move, and forced her to reconsider the very principles upon which the frozen crusade was founded. Yet Elsa did not falter. Her calm, her lattice, and her unwavering discipline were her allies, and she had learned that true mastery lay not in perfection, but in adaptation. The next campaign brought her to the shattered world of Nivelon Prime, where warp scars and centuries of warfare had left cities frozen in psychic stasis. Here, the mirror sought to consolidate, projecting illusions so convincing that entire regiments of Astartes hesitated, unsure whether friend or foe stood before them. Elsa's lattice extended fully, integrating the planet's psychic nodes, reinforcing the Frost Titans, and synchronizing every Imperial unit with unprecedented precision. Ardent strike teams executed maneuvers so refined that even seasoned veterans marveled at their effectiveness, the battlefield itself becoming a single coordinated organism under Elsa's guidance. For days, the struggle continued. The Mirror of Frost countered with complex psychic distortions, shifting terrain, and emergent constructs that tested every calculation Elsa had made. It was not mere combat, but a contest of intelligence, strategy, and foresight. Yet the lattice adapted in real time. Elsa introduced deliberate patterns to mislead the mirror, alternating zones of psychic frost and harmonic resonance, forcing the entity to overextend its influence. Each misstep it made was an opportunity, and her forces exploited them with surgical efficiency. Amid the chaos, Magnus the Red arrived to advise on the subtle manipulations of the warp. Together, he and Elsa devised techniques to exploit the mirror's reliance on reflection. By introducing unpredictability, imperceptible deviations in psychic patterns, minor environmental shifts, and feints in troop movement, they forced the mirror to falter. What it could anticipate was neutralized. What it could not counter. The climax of the campaign unfolded in the frozen capital of Nivellon Prime, where spires of psychic ice projected across the city, shimmering with illusory power. Elsa, her presence radiating through the lattice, extended her will fully, freezing constructs mid-motion, redirecting psychic currents, and guiding every soldier with flawless precision. The Grey Knight struck at the synapse points of the mirror's projections. Titans shattered warped structures, and Psykers stabilized the lattice against the entity's final desperate attempts at interference. By the campaign's conclusion, Nivellon Prime had been liberated. The Mirror of Frost, though not destroyed, was contained and partially mapped, its intelligence now a resource to study rather than an immediate threat. Elsa's lattice had endured the ultimate test, a conscious, adaptive adversary capable of learning from her every move. She had not merely survived, she had evolved. In the aftermath, Elsa addressed her council, her calm authority undiminished. The galaxy is vast, and its chaos unending. We will face threats that mirror ourselves, that challenge our assumptions, and that test our discipline. The lattice is not an instrument of domination, but a guide. Every encounter strengthens us, teaches us, and prepares us for what comes next. We do not seek to destroy the universe, we seek to harmonize it. The Imperium, for the first time in millennia, had glimpsed a new paradigm. Worlds once beset by rebellion, xenos, and mortal warp-born anomalies now observed a vision of order, discipline, and adaptability unparalleled in history. Yet Elsa knew that vigilance was eternal. The Mirror of Frost would return, hive fleets would evolve, and the echoes of discord would continue their subtle machinations. But she was prepared. The Frozen Crusade had proven that even in a galaxy of chaos, intelligence, discipline, and serenity could shape outcomes, restrain madness, and guide humanity toward a future where control was not imposed by fear, but earned through understanding and competence. Elsa, the Empress of Ice, had transformed the Imperium not through destruction, but through harmony. And the galaxy had been forever changed. Still, in the silent void, the Mirror of Frost watched, waiting, learning, and preparing for the day that Elsa's lattice would be tested once more.
The Frozen Crusade had endured the trials of rebellion, xenos, and the insidious challenges of the warp itself. Elsa's lattice had demonstrated an unparalleled capacity to harmonize vast systems, anticipate threats, and guide humanity with both discipline and compassion. From the icy streets of Glacius Secundus to the frozen plains of Nivellon Prime, the Imperium had witnessed a transformation. Competence and precision had replaced fear, foresight had supplanted chaos, and the philosophy of restraint had reshaped the very fabric of war. Yet the galaxy remained a living, breathing crucible of unpredictability. Hive fleets evolved, daimonic entities adapted, and even the semi-conscious mirror of Frost reflected Elsa's methods back against her. Every victory was tempered by awareness, every success shadowed by the knowledge that the universe would not remain static. The lattice, powerful though it was, had limits, and within those limits lay the constant potential for discovery, evolution, and challenge. Through it all, Elsa remained unbroken. Her calm, her discipline, and her mastery of the psychic lattice had allowed her to face threats that would have shattered lesser commanders. Allies and enemies alike had come to recognize the elegance and authority of her methods. Even Magnus the Red, the Crimson Sorcerer, acknowledged her intellect and restraint, noting that her philosophy of harmony was as formidable as any weapon in the galaxy. The Imperium had glimpsed a new way forward, not through fear or devastation, but through the disciplined application of intelligence, foresight, and unity. Elsa's reign was not merely a conquest of territory, but a conquest of chaos itself. A demonstration that even in the 41st millennium, where death, betrayal, and corruption were constants, order could prevail. And yet, as the echoes of discord waited, the mirror of Frost learned and the warp stirred, Elsa understood that her greatest challenges were yet to come. The galaxy would continue to test her, but she would meet each trial with serenity, precision, and the unyielding will of the Frozen Crusade.